Hi, I'm Dan Norton. In this video, I will play and comment on my third call to the David Pakman Show, a leftist show on YouTube with over 3 million subscribers. Links to my commentary videos on my first and second calls to Pakman Show are in the description. Here is the thumbnail and title of the video of my third call as it appears on Pakman's channel. I'll comment on the thumbnail and title later, but first I'll just play the video. In the beginning of the video, we discuss some preliminary matters unrelated to political philosophy. If you want to skip ahead to the political philosophy section of our discussion, I've included a timestamp in the description that will take you straight to that point. Now here's the video.
Why don't we go next to Dan from California? Dan from California, welcome to the program. What's on your mind today?
Hi, David. I called a few months ago and asked if I could post my calls to your show on my YouTube channel, and you said no. But I was wondering if I did not post a video, if I only posted the audio of it, would that be okay?
Dan, I think every time you call, you ask about that.
If that's what he thinks, then he's wrong. For instance, listen to my first call, in which I don't ask anything related to recording calls.
And I don't know how interesting it is to post calls about whether you can post calls.
I didn't want to post calls about whether I can post calls. I wanted to post calls about substantive, ethical, and political content, which is what my calls were mostly about. I would have been happy to resolve by email the question about whether I can post calls, but David never replied to my emails about this, or anything else. So I thought maybe the only way to get an answer about whether I could post calls would be to ask him during one of my calls. Here's the email I had previously sent him, but never received a reply to. Let's now continue with the video.
But the rules are the same for everybody, which is if you are transforming the content we post, either by doing an analysis of it, and so you're playing the audio and video, but you're talking about it, or you are posting a recording you make from your side of the calls, that's all fine. What you can't do is just upload our content unedited, because that's just reposting, and that is not allowed. The algorithm will automatically, remove that content or copyright claim it. I don't know what it does. I don't even manage it. So the rules remain the same for everybody on that.
I'm not sure David understood the way in which my question in this call about posting an audio-only recording differed from my question in the previous call, where I didn't distinguish between posting a video recording and posting an audio-only recording. I already understood, based on the policy he stated in my previous call, which he repeats here, that I could not just upload the identical content from his channel onto my channel. But uploading just the audio and not the video would not be uploading the identical content. For this reason, and another, which I won't go into here, I thought he might be okay with my posting an audio-only version, and I wanted to confirm whether that was the case by asking him about it. But let's continue.
Okay. I guess one other thing. Is it okay if I mention what my channel is before I get to my substantive question?
You know what? Why don't we just get, this isn't like to promote channels. Like did you have a question today? Let's go to the question directly rather than all the kind of, sidebar.
I know the main point of David's show is not to promote other channels, but I thought he might be okay with a brief mention of what my channel is. Other show hosts whose shows I've called have been fine with that, and that seems reasonable to me. At least partly because I'm helping provide the show host with some content for their channels by calling into their shows. But if David doesn't want callers to mention their channels, that's fine. I respect that. I did think, however, that it was at least worth asking about. In the next segment, we finally start getting into some issues of political philosophy.
Okay. So in our last discussion, I was describing my Ayn Randian view that a social system should be voluntary and not coercive. And as part of your criticism of a voluntary system, you said that it would result in some people having priority and greater access to things that you should be that you think should be public services. And to that, I would say, if by public services you mean services that people should be forced to fund, I don't think there should be any public services. I think forcing people is wrong. I think that's anti-freedom. So I'm interested in, is that what you meant by public services, that services people should be forced to provide?
Public services can be anything from public transit to police to the framework of law around which contracts can be enforced. Here's the thing, Dan. The reason these conversations are so boring and pointless to me is that I am not planning on leaving society.
I'm not planning on leaving society either. I just advocate for a different kind of society than David does.
And in anything approximating an even remotely well-functioning society, you pay taxes, and the taxes are used to fund a variety of public services. And I like that. I want to live in a society where such public services are provided.
What about the United States in the late 19th century, when there was little or no income tax? Was that a remotely well-functioning society? I'd say so. It was a period of explosive growth for the country. Its freedom and opportunities were so great that millions of people chose to immigrate here. It was not exactly the sort of society I support, with no government coercion at all. But it was much closer to that than it is today, at least in important respects. And I think it did very well as a result.
So this entire thing of, the people are forced to provide services and the taxes are slavery and everything, it's just not even interesting because I live in a real society that exists and I want to improve it as much as I can.
I also live in a real society that exists, and I also want to improve it as much as I can. I just have a different idea than David does of how to improve it. He thinks coercing people is part of a good society. Or at least I think his view implies that, since, for instance, he, like most people, supports taxes, which people are forced to pay under threat of jail. I think differently. I think it's immoral and a violation of rights to coerce people, either through taxation or other means. I support the retaliatory use of force in cases of self-defense, but I oppose the initiation of force or the threat of the initiation of force. I'm a principled advocate for freedom. And I think freedom is best for everyone. It's both moral and practical, as it respects people's rights and leads to the greatest prosperity. And I think history bears this out. The freer societies have been, the better they've done. Compare, for instance, North Korea and South Korea, or the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc in the Cold War, or China under Mao and China under Deng Xiaoping after it was somewhat liberalized. The examples abound.
And so talking with folks who, are you actively looking to move to such an Ayn Randian voluntarist society as you describe? Is that something you're actively looking for to move to from California?
No, I'm looking to live in the best place I can, which for me, I think right now is America. And I want all these services as well, but I don't think that means that we have to force people to provide them. I think it's immoral and wrong to do that.
And
The
what do you
issue is
like
not
when you
should there
say
be these
when you
services.
say a public service that an individual is being forced to provide? Can you give me just an example so I know like generally what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, it could be anything: police, water, electricity. The issue is how it's funded, not whether the service exists. I think all these services should exist, but I don't think people should be forced at gunpoint to provide these or to fund these services. I think that's
People are
immoral.
forced at, hold on, the police officers are being forced at gunpoint to be officers?
No. The funding of these services, you have to pay taxes or else you're going to be hauled off to jail.
Right.
People with guns that are going to show up. So it's a coercive mechanism of funding these services that I want and that you also want. But what we differ over is whether it's appropriate to coerce people into providing them. I think it's not appropriate.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second, Dan. I mean, this is such, I feel like I'm back in, for freshman economics here because we're going back to this. But
does freshman economics tell you that it's better to coerce people rather than leave them free? That the government, rather than the free market, should provide people with water, electricity, and transportation? Or is that just the opinion of some statist economists? An opinion which isn't necessarily shared by free market economists? And is the question of whether freedom or coercion is better a question of economics, or does it lie more directly in the realm of ethics and political philosophy?
People are being forced to pay taxes to pay for police, which they may not want to do. You're choosing to work and live in a place that has taxes, right?
Yes, but there's no right on the part of the people who are coercing you it's not just the choice to live somewhere, it's what they do after you're there. Like if you go to somewhere and you know that there are rapists around the streets and there's a chance that you will get raped, yet you choose to go out at night and then you happen to get raped, that doesn't mean you chose to get raped. It doesn't convert that sexual.
No, but what I'm saying is something different. If you live in California, I'm shocked people still have these sorts of discussions because it just does nothing to improve society.
I think discussing the issue of freedom versus coercion is critical to having a good society. To the extent people don't understand this issue, the quality of their lives and their ability to achieve happiness will suffer. If David thinks coercion is necessary for a good society, or if he thinks taxes are not coercive because someone might choose to live in a society that has them, then I think he's mistaken. And I think many people are indeed mistaken about this, and that they need to correct this mistake if they want to achieve the best possible society.
But Dan, if you live in California and you say, okay, I'm aware of the tax system here, and I'm going to live here and I'm going to work here, and I am going to have to pay taxes. And I might not like the way my taxes are used, and my recourse is to join with other people who don't like how my taxes are used and to vote for someone who will use my taxes in a different way. And if I don't like that, I can move, or I can go completely off the grid and go back to a state of nature where I just, become a hunter-gatherer.
As I said in my first video in this series, David can also move. He can also go off the grid and be a hunter-gatherer if he doesn't like the way things are. Both he and I are advocates for social change. We don't like everything about the way society currently is. But that doesn't mean that either of us should move or go off the grid and be a hunter-gatherer. It could be that the best choice is to just stay where we are and try to improve things there. But we have different views of what improvement would look like.
Or, it's just like we've gone over this. This is one of those kind of extreme libertarian arguments that does nothing for anyone.
I don't call myself a libertarian, but I think arguments such as Ayn Rand gives are extremely powerful, and they have the potential to revolutionize the world for the better. If David isn't interested in discussing the arguments, I think that's too bad. But I hope at least some in his audience find them worth considering. When I call a show like David's, I don't really expect to change the mind of the host. But I do hope that some of his listeners might be more open to different ideas and be interested in what I have to say, and perhaps even subscribe to my channel. And this has indeed happened many times, which I appreciate. In the next segment of the call, I bring up the issue of slavery to show how just because an institution exists, that doesn't mean we should accept it. Perhaps it's easier to see this point on the example of slavery than on the example of taxes, but the principle is the same. Just because you don't like something about society, whether it's slavery or taxes, doesn't necessarily mean you should leave that society and live elsewhere. Rather, you can reasonably choose to stay in that society and fight for what you think would make it better. This discussion, in turn, led to a discussion of the role of majorities in society. Here's the clip, picking up from the point where I say that I disagree with David about the value of these sorts of discussions.
Well, I disagree. I mean, I think
Okay.
having these arguments is important, and I think there's a lot of confusion surrounding them. So I think it's a worthwhile sort of discussion to have. Um, I mean, you could say about this antebellum South. You know, we had slavery.
Yeah.
Should we just accept that? That's just part of society, or should
No,
we
we
fight
didn't
against it
accept
because
it.
it's
We
an
went to war
injustice?
over it to end it because that's what the majority
Right.
ultimately wanted to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I don't think it's just the majority that matters. Even if whether it's a minority or a majority that wants slavery, it's an unjust institution
I
and it
agree.
should be
I agree
gotten
with
rid
that.
of.
Yeah.
I don't believe in mob rule. I don't think just because a majority wants something that it should go. I mean,
Listen, Dan, you've
that's
been
what killed
calling me for
Socrates.
years with very similar questions.
I haven't been calling him for years. I called 3 times within the span of less than 1 year. Not that it matters much.
What have you done other than call me to try to shift society to be the voluntarist society you desire?
Well, I've called lots of people. I've debated Sam Cedar a number of times. I've debated Luke Beasley, I think he's associated with your show. I mean, on my YouTube channel, if you're interested in what I've done, I'm not going to say what it is unless you tell me to. But I've done lots of discussions and debates with people, trying to give people a different way to look at things. So, and I plan to continue doing more of that. So
All right,
that's
Dan
some of
from
what I've done.
California, very good. If folks are interested in this sort of discussion, they can let me know. What I see from the audience whenever Ayn Rand types call in with this stuff about taxes are coerced and I don't want to do anything, I don't want to pay for anything unless I want to. I want it should all be voluntary. The reaction is like, hey, let's fix the society we have in reasonable ways rather than kind of live in these fantasy worlds that have never worked anywhere.
I think what I advocate is very reasonable. And I think it's realistic, not fantasy, to suppose that a voluntary society could work. And history provides support for this. As I indicated before, to the extent societies have been based on freedom rather than coercion, they've done better. And this is what one should expect, given that reason is our basic means of survival, an important identification in Ayn Rand's philosophy. When reason is left free to function, when it is not throttled by coercion, then, to the extent it is left free, people are able to produce the values that their lives and happiness depend on. Here's the last bit of the call.
But maybe I'm wrong. The audience will let me know. All right, everybody, let's go to a break. Appreciate everybody who called in and that I was not able to talk to, but we will do it again.
In my third call to David's show, he seemed more abrasive and dismissive than I've ever seen him before. Some commentators on the video also picked up on this aspect of David's manner. For instance, one commenter wrote, "David, I am on your side, almost always. But this time I think you should have been less condescending." Another commenter wrote, "Damn, David, I usually am cool with the way you treat callers, but this one was mean, dismissive, and judgmental." Another commenter wrote that David was, quote, "really rude to that guy," unquote, and that it was, quote, "very effed up how you talk to that man," unquote. I think people often resort to rudeness when they run out of arguments, and maybe something like that happened in this case. Although David did not laugh at or mock me during the call, the thumbnail for the video on his channel shows him with what seems to be a mocking grin, and the title reads, "Ayn Rand Libertarian Back Again for more insufferable nonsense. While David may have nothing to do with the choice of thumbnails or titles for the videos on his channel, maybe it's all done by an editor, I think it reflects poorly on his channel that it would stoop to mocking someone who has been civil and well-intentioned to David. As for insufferable nonsense, well, that's an opinion, and I think a very bad one that reflects poorly on whoever holds it and gives it voice. It seems the thumbnail and title for the first of my calls on his channel are also intended to display mockery. Although, as I explained in my commentary video on that call, the title is a distortion. The thumbnail and title for the second of my calls on his channel seem like they may be intended to display frustration or exasperation. Although, as I explained in my commentary video on that call, the title is again a distortion. So I was pretty disappointed with the titles and thumbnails for my calls on Pakman's channel, and I actually lost some respect for his channel as a result. But I am nevertheless glad that I had the opportunity to be on his show a few times, and that we were able to have at least a couple of respectful conversations. And I'm thankful to David for that. I don't know if I'll be calling his show again, given how my last call went. But in any case, I invite David or his followers, or anyone else, to call my own show if they're interested in having a civil discussion or debate. That completes my series of videos on my 3 calls to the David Pakman Show. If you like this content, I encourage you to hit the like button and consider sharing and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.